A sandwich seems like one of the simplest foods in the world. Bread on one side, bread on the other, something in the middle, that is it. You can eat one at a desk, in a car, at school, at work, or standing over the kitchen counter when you do not feel like making anything else. But the word sandwich has a stranger story than the food itself. Because people were putting food on bread long before anyone called it a sandwich. So why is it called a sandwich? And why did one man's title become the name of one of the most common meals in the world? I'm Earl, the creator of Everyday Sayings and Origins. To keep each episode consistent, I use my digital likeness. Now, back to the story. Today, a sandwich can mean many things. Turkey and cheese, peanut butter and jelly, ham on rye, chicken salad, a breakfast sandwich, a giant sub, a tiny tea sandwich. The idea is flexible. If food is held between bread, most people know what to call it, but that is part of what makes the origin interesting. The thing existed before the name became famous. Bread has been used to hold food for a very long time. That makes sense. Bread is useful. It is portable. It keeps your hands cleaner. It can turn meat, cheese, vegetables, or leftovers into something easier to carry and eat. So the Earl of Sandwich did not invent the basic idea of putting food with bread. People had been doing versions of that long before him. What he helped give us was the name, and that name takes us to England in the 1700s. The man most connected to the sandwich was John Montagu, the Fourth Earl of Sandwich. That title sounds like the setup for a joke, but Sandwich was a real place name and a real noble title. John Montagu was not famous only for lunch. He was a British statesman. He held serious positions in government and the navy. But today, most people know him for the food that carries his title. That is a strange kind of fame. A person can spend a life in politics, power, and public affairs and still be remembered mostly because of what people eat between two slices of bread. The famous story goes like this. The Earl was playing cards. He did not want to stop the game for a full meal, so he asked for meat to be placed between pieces of bread. That way, he could eat with one hand and keep playing. Other people supposedly noticed and asked for the same thing as sandwich. Over time, the name stuck. It is a great story because it is easy to picture. A gambling table. Cards in hand. A hungry man who does not want to leave the game. A servant brings meat between bread, and a food name is born. That version is popular because it gives the sandwich a clear reason for existing. Convenience. No fork, no plate, no greasy fingers on the cards, just food you can hold while doing something else. And if you think about how people eat sandwiches today, that part still feels right. A sandwich is often the meal of convenience. It fits into a busy day. It can be eaten quickly. It does not require much ceremony. It works when you want food without stopping everything else. So, the card table story sounds believable. But there is another possibility. Some historians suggest the Earl may not have first eaten this way because of gambling. He may have needed a quick meal while working. That version is less dramatic, but it also makes sense. John Montagu had public duties. He was involved in politics and naval affairs. A busy man working at a desk might also want food that could be eaten without a formal meal. So there are two main images. One is the gambling table, the other is the work desk. Both point to the same basic need. Food that is quick, clean, and easy to handle. That may be the real reason the name lasted. Not because one exact moment was so magical, but because the idea solved a problem people already understood. Sometimes the origin of a word is not really about inventing a thing. It is about naming a thing at the right time. People were already eating bread with fillings. But when a fashionable or well-known person becomes associated with a habit, the name can travel. If people started saying, "I will have the same as sandwich," the title could turn into a label. That is how a person's name becomes a common word. It happens more often than we realize. Some words come from inventors, some come from places, some come from brands, some come from people whose names became attached to an object, style, or habit. With sandwich, the title became more famous than the man. Most people who say the word today are not thinking about John Montagu. They are thinking about lunch. That is how completely the name changed. It stopped feeling like a person's title and became the normal name for the food. There is another reason the word spread so well. It is short. It is easy to say. It fits many kinds of food. A sandwich does not have to be fancy. It does not have to be hot or cold. It does not have to be meat. It only needs the basic idea of bread holding something inside. That flexibility helped the word travel. Once people had a simple name for the idea could expand. The sandwich could move from taverns and homes to lunch boxes, restaurants, picnics, diners, offices, and school cafeterias. It could become cheap or expensive, plain or elaborate. small, or ridiculous. That is one of the reasons the sandwich became so universal. It is not one recipe, it is a format. A sandwich can change depending on the country, the family, the budget, the season, or whatever happens to be in the kitchen. That makes it different from foods that are tied to one exact preparation. A sandwich is more like a food structure: bread, filling, held together. Once you understand the structure, you can change almost everything else. That is why the name could survive across so many versions. The same word can describe a simple lunch and a carefully made restaurant meal. It can describe something packed for a child and something served at a fancy event. It can describe comfort food, fast food, travel food, or late-night food. The word stretches because the food stretches. But the origin story also tells us something about modern life. A sandwich is not only about taste, it is about time. It is food for people who need to keep moving. That is why the card table version feels so memorable, whether every detail is perfect or not. The Earl does not want to stop. He wants food that fits around the activity. That is exactly how many people still use sandwiches. Lunch between meetings, food during a road trip, a quick bite before work. Something you can eat without slowing the whole day down. In that way, the sandwich feels very modern, even though the name is old. It matches a world where people are busy, distracted, moving, and trying to do several things at once. The funny part is that a food named for an English nobleman became one of the least formal meals imaginable. Most people do not eat sandwiches because they want to feel royal. They eat them because they are practical. That contrast is part of the charm. A noble title became the name of a common lunch. Something connected to an earl became something anyone can make. That is how language can flatten history. The word once pointed to a person with status. Now it points to whatever is wrapped in paper, packed in a lunch bag, or sitting on a plate beside chips. The name lost its upper-class feeling and became ordinary. And that is probably why most people never question it. Sandwich sounds like a food word now. It does not sound like a title. It does not sound like a place. It just sounds like lunch. But once you know the story, the word feels different. Every sandwich carries a little piece of that old naming accident. Not because John Montagu invented bread and filling, not because no one had ever eaten that way before, but because his name became attached to a convenient form of eating at the right moment. That is the honest answer. The sandwich as a food idea is older than the Earl. The sandwich as a name is tied to him, and the reason it lasted is simple. The word was useful because the food was useful. People needed a quick, portable meal. They needed a name for it, and once that name caught on, it never really left. So, why is it called a sandwich? Because John Montagu, the Fourth Earl of Sandwich, became linked to the habit of eating meat between pieces of bread in the 1700s. The exact story may have been shaped over time. Maybe it happened during a card game. Maybe it happened during work. But either way, the name stuck because the idea was too practical to disappear. Bread made the food portable. The filling made it satisfying. The name made it easy to ask for. And now, centuries later, people all over the world still use the title of an English earl without thinking about it. They just call it a sandwich. If you enjoyed discovering the story behind this everyday word, subscribe to Everyday Sayings and Origins. Each episode uncovers the hidden history behind the words, phrases, rhymes, and traditions we use without thinking. I'm Earl. Stay curious, and I'll see you in the next origin. Peace.